Well, it's finally become clear why Kiev Kellogg came to Kiev and why the Kremlin is once again talking about a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump.
The Times reports today that Vladimir Zelenskyy has put forward a proposal to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, which includes a ceasefire, the mutual withdrawal of Russian and Ukrainian troops from the front line, and the creation of a buffer zone under the administration of a third party. The Ukrainian side worked on this plan together with Donald Trump's envoys and European officials. And there is a high probability that as early as Tuesday, a representative of the Vatican will personally deliver the details of this proposal to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. At the same time, the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Krylo Budanov, made a mysterious statement, and I quote, "Negotiations require discretion. We will try to resume negotiations in the near future." Meanwhile, the Kremlin is seriously hoping that Donald Trump will fly to the ASEAN summit in Beijing in November, where Putin will also be present. And so they hope that the two leaders of the US and Russia will finally meet. So let's now analyze the whole picture together in as much detail as possible, because it looks like we're entering a new negotiation cycle again. My name is Alexei Pesci. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, and don't forget to leave your comment under this video, maybe not now, but at the end, after you've watched it. I would appreciate it. So, today it emerged that Volodymyr Zelenskyy presented a proposal to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. The Ukrainian side reportedly worked on this plan together with Trump's envoys and European officials. Let's start with the plan itself, as outlined by Zelenskyy, and then I'll give his exact quote. Together with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, we agreed to bring all these discussions into one framework. What real opportunities are there? Are there opportunities to end the war? The Americans want to discuss this with us and with the Russians. In short, there is one idea for a ceasefire. That's the main thing. The second part is what the Americans proposed regarding a free economic zone. In other words, we and the Russians both take equal steps back, creating a buffer called a free economic zone under some kind of administration. It's not clear which one yet. It will be some kind of third party. And third, what will the European Union and NATO do, and what is Ukraine ready to do for this? Then Zelenskyy emphasized that the ideas are not exclusively Ukrainian. Quote, "These are joint ideas with the Americans and Europeans, as well as the result of finalized discussions between the Americans, us, and the Russians." How do you like this turn of events? All sides responded positively. No one raised any objections. There are a few more ideas from the American side as far as we know. They want to find the right moment to announce them. We are waiting for them. So, as you understand, the behind-the-scenes part of the negotiations is still ongoing. No matter what, all sides are saying in public, behind closed doors negotiations are underway, and it turns out there are already some developments, which both the Americans, the Ukrainians, and the Russians agree with. Basically, the essence of the new peace plan is that hostilities stop and both Ukrainian and Russian troops withdraw the same distance back from the front line. And the area between them becomes a free economic zone under the management of some third party. At the same time, former Trump representative Kiev Kellogg stated that this does not mean at all that the West, and primarily the United States, recognizes the occupied territories as Russian. Next is a quote from Kiev Kellogg. "Do we recognize Crimea as Russian territory? No. The same goes for Donbass, Luhansk or Donetsk, Kherson or Zaporizhia. They are simply occupied. That's it. We acknowledge that. And eventually, maybe not tomorrow or the day after, but they will return to Ukraine." It is reported that the drafted peace proposal will be handed over to the Russians as early as Tuesday through a representative of the Vatican. Why could the Vatican become this channel for communication? There is an interesting point here. The thing is, the visit of the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner to Moscow has been postponed. That is, it hasn't been cancelled, but it has definitely been postponed. It's unlikely that this visit will take place before the end of August, so there are reasons to postpone it. This was stated at the White House. And earlier, another source reported that Witkoff and Kushner might visit both Kiev and Moscow before the end of this month. So, there was a plan to visit Kiev and Moscow, but it was the Moscow part that got stalled. And that's why I previously assumed that this was the reason Kit Kellogg arrived in Kiev. Because he continues to work specifically on the Ukraine track. At the same time, the head of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, stated that Vladimir Putin is ready to meet again with the envoys of the American leader. But the question is, what proposals will they bring? So it creates a logical chain. Since the direct visit of Witkoff and Kushner to Moscow has stalled, and the official channel is clearly being cautious, so an alternative, less politically loaded channel is being used. That is, through the Vatican, which has already acted as a mediator in humanitarian and diplomatic issues of this war more than once. Nevertheless, the negotiations, the public part of the negotiations, are really being prepared. Recently, the aide to the Russian dictator Yuri Ushakov stated that the presidents of Russia and the United States, Volodymyr Putin and Donald Trump, will meet and hold talks if they both attend the APEC summit in China. However, so far there have been no signals from the American side on this matter, Putin's aide noted. Let me remind you that the APEC summit this year will be held in Shenzhen, China, on November 18 and 19. China, which is hosting this forum, has put forward the slogan of creating a prosperous community in the Asia-Pacific region and has identified 3 key areas of work. These are openness, innovation, and cooperation. At the same time, let me remind you that as early as September, Trump will host Xi Jinping in Washington. Now let's recall Budanov's statement, and it's important not to oversimplify its meaning here. Next, I'll quote the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. Negotiations prefer discretion. We will try to resume talks in the near future. But he immediately added an important caveat. Quote, I'm not saying that we will completely stop the war right now. This is more of a technical aspect. So Budanov is clearly distinguishing between 2 different processes. Resuming talks is one thing. And the actual cessation of hostilities is a completely different matter. It's much further away and not guaranteed at all. The phrase negotiations prefer discretion is also meaningful in itself. He implies that real diplomatic work may not be happening through public statements right now, but rather through closed channels like that Vatican mediation. And Zelenskyy also hinted at this. And what's telling is that the Russians have also been saying in recent weeks that negotiations require discretion and have moved behind the scenes. The broader context is also important. Volodymyr Zelenskyy rejected calls to hold elections during the war, calling this idea a tsunami that would split the country. And he warned against creating internal division between civilians and the military. This is a direct public response to the call by former Defense Minister Mikhailo Fyodorov for wartime elections, which we discussed in a separate episode. But it's also a signal that the president's office may be focused on a new round of the peace process, and based on its results, some decisions will be made. Regarding the territorial situation, Zelenskyy reported that the Dnipropetrovsk region has been almost completely liberated from the filthy Russian occupiers. Only 10 square kilometers of the region remain under Russian control. He set the goal of achieving territorial parity by the end of 2026. As of today, Russia has occupied 990 square kilometers in 2026. This year, Ukraine has reclaimed 820 square kilometers. Another local operation should be completed by the end of August, said Zelenskyy, but he hasn't revealed which one yet. So there's some intrigue here. Something is planned. And today, by the way, I also heard some insider information that it's apparently not happening today. But in the next few days, Ukraine's defense forces have something planned, so things will get heated for the Russians. At the same time, Zelenskyy today announced that the defense budget deficit is $27 billion, and right now they need to find that money somewhere.
He says all the money that was allocated for defense, including for military salaries, has run out. That's it, at the moment there is none left.
There was also a separate warning about a new potential threat. If Russia achieves its goals in the east, Putin has given his generals a deadline to capture the rest of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, including Kostiantynivka and Slavyansk, by the end of this year. Then Moscow may redeploy its 300,000 newly mobilized troops to other fronts, including a theoretical offensive from Bryansk region towards Chernihiv and Kyiv regions. So far, Russian troops have not been concentrated in Bryansk, but Ukrainian intelligence is monitoring equipment along the border. And in sync with these statements, today a NB8 summit was held in Kyiv. The leaders of 8 Northern European and Baltic countries, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway and Sweden, they arrived to discuss with President Zelenskyy of Ukraine the strengthening of Ukrainian air defense. The summit is focused on developing European capabilities against ballistic missiles and accelerating the production of interceptor systems and anti-drone technologies. This summit was preceded by the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, which also took place today. Well, it's interesting that after the Coalition of the Willing summit, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that the first joint military exercises of the Coalition of the Willing, led by the United Kingdom and France, will take place in October and November of this year. That is, these are already formed coalition military forces and they will be practicing coordinated joint operations. He mentioned the upcoming maneuvers while talking about the Allies' priorities in supporting Ukraine and providing it with security guarantees after the war ends. And this also indicates an acceleration in preparations for the peace process. A separate question in this whole topic is, what exactly does the concept of a free economic zone mean in practice? So, as we discussed a little earlier, the idea is that troops are withdrawn from both sides and the area between them is called a free economic zone. So, back in December of last year, Zelenskyy said, and I quote, "If we create a free economic zone here, and it involves an almost demilitarized zone, that means heavy forces are withdrawn from this territory. And the distance, for example, could be 5, 10 or 40 kilometers. Then, if these two cities, Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, are our free economic zone, the Russians will have to withdraw their troops by 5, 10 or 40 kilometers accordingly." Well, the principle is symmetrical. Both sides retreat the same distance from some notional line, leaving a buffer zone between them under some third-party administration. This is exactly what Zelenskyy is talking about again now, 8 months later, as a concept that is still relevant and under discussion. He also added back then, in December of last year, that the fate of such a deal should be decided by the voters themselves. Ukrainian voters through a referendum, which requires at least 60 days to organize. And the actual ceasefire must last just as long. So the issue of elections is really being postponed for now, with hope for this very process, but maybe a little later. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, like the episode, and leave any comment you want. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.